Welcome to a special installment of Bootstrappers. Our third season premieres September 23rd, and you can find us anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Today, we're going to talk about the latest developments of the Eviction Moratorium with NARPM President Scott Abernathy.
So here we are today for a timely segment for a topic that is very important to us in the property management industry. And that is about the Eviction Moratorium, which I'm certain all of us have heard about. And we have Scott Abernathy, who is the president of Property Management, Inc. and PMI Professionals. He's also, and I think more importantly, the president of NARPM, and somebody I've known for years as somebody who very much cares about the issues that affect our industry. So who better to talk to about the moratorium than somebody that knows what they're talking about? Scott Abernathy, hey, thanks a million for being on the show with us and helping this industry understand a little bit better about what we can expect on a go-forward basis. So how does it affect us? What's going on?
You got it. My pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad we can get this timely information out to other property managers as well, because we've had a lot of changes that have happened just in the last week. Do we want to go through a little bit of history first?
Let's do.
Okay. All right. Well, eviction moratoriums are a new thing in our industry. We've not seen this before. And it started with the CARES Act right as the pandemic was kicking off. The CARES Act was a act produced by Congress that put a moratorium on all evictions for any property that was financed with some sort of federally backed loan, which would be, probably 90% or more of the loan. If it traded on the secondary market, it was federally backed. So by and large, there was an eviction moratorium there that only lasted through about, I think, the end of July of 2020. It wasn't a very long one, and that was an act by Congress. And then out of left field, just nobody knew this was coming at all. Thought we were getting out of the woods, and the Center for Disease Control, it's actually the Department of Health and Human Services, who's the regulatory agency over the CDC, puts out an eviction moratorium due to the pandemic, concerned about creating homelessness, which would then possibly move, the virus more virally around the world, this, that, and the other. And so they implemented an eviction moratorium also for a short period of time. It was another couple of months. And then that got extended. And once it got extended, there were some lawsuits starting to be filed as the industry realized this had no end. So it got extended again, and you guys know that the rest of the history kept getting extended until just recently. The eviction moratorium that we were most recently under did expire last month in July. Again, it expired because the U.S. Supreme Court ruled it lightly unconstitutional. That's my word, by the way, not theirs. The opinion written by Judge Kavanaugh was relatively weak. Basically said, you know what, we don't think this is constitutional, but you only got a couple more weeks to deal with it. Just deal with it. That's basically what it says. Didn't outright condemn an eviction moratorium. So what did the administration do? The CDC came out with a new eviction moratorium, slightly written different. It's kind of like having a child whenever you tell them, you can't have vanilla ice cream, and they go get chocolate ice cream. But Dad, you said I can't have vanilla. You know what I mean?
Right.
Kind of like that. Right. It's a little change like that. Next thing you know, we are here again under another eviction moratorium for, again, another short period of time. These are all short periods of time. So there's never enough time for anything to litigate up to the Supreme Court. So that's where you were up until this last Friday. Anybody want to know what happened Friday?
It's unconstitutional.
Fortunately, we had some lawsuits that were already in place that were moving forward in the system. One of those, one of the plaintiffs was one of our NARPM members, Robert Gilstrap, along with the National, Georgia, and Alabama Association of Realtors. It was presented to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did rule that it was unconstitutional. And that what that did was that opened up the opportunity for the other cases that are moving through the system to proceed, to be able to get an injunction or an outright ruling of unconstitutionality.
But it's important to note. It's important to note that it was It was because the CDC was the one authorizing it, and so CDC doesn't have that jurisdiction, correct? And so
it's kind of that way.
Okay.
It's more about the regulatory agencies, not really so much the CDC as it is the regulatory agencies in general. And yes, you hit the nail on the head. This fight is not over because it did leave the door open for Congress to be able to do an eviction moratorium.
And it explicitly said that in the 8-page, what do they call that?
Ruling.
Like a ruling. That
opinion letter. Yeah.
Opinion letter that they could, if they wanted to do this, it would have to go through Congress to be extended to be extended. Correct? That's
correct. The challenge with that is now we as active agencies like NARPM and the National Apartment Association, as well as the New Civil Liberties Alliance, which we are all plaintiffs in another case moving forward in the system right now. Now we've got to be watching for Congress. And Congress is already having talks about doing a new eviction moratorium. At this point, I don't think they have the votes or the stomach for it, but we'll be watching that closely.
So what I want to kind of know is at the heart of the issue, at the heart of the CDC's recommendation, and even the heart of the original congressional mandate or whatever, moratorium, what they're trying to do is protect people from being evicted. So the way I want to present the question this way: did it actually achieve its objective, the moratorium itself? Because, and I'll go back and from my experience, the moratorium really caused a little bit more friction than I think it had to. In one sense, it served as an important tool. It made it easy to identify who needed help. But once we identified who needed help by, through a procedure, they were able to get money readily and pay us the rent. So we have 1,200 units, and I think we had one eviction that we actually got because they were kind of stepping out of line. They weren't working with us in any way. But so the question is, has the moratorium done much to protect tenants?
Well, the intent of the moratorium really had little to do with protecting tenants. It had to do with preventing the spread of this virus.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the pretext that the CDC did. But to your point, I think that's true. And technically, that's right.
Yeah. But did it achieve its goal? Yeah, absolutely. We were not able to evict people for 18 months almost, in most places. And there are some states that have eviction moratoriums also. So this isn't going to be a cure-all for those states. I feel sorry for those folks out west. They're going to deal with this for a long time.
And even cities or local jurisdictions can have moratoriums.
In my opinion, that's where these need to stay, though. It looks to me like the CDC or a regulatory agency or Congress is usurping state law whenever they do stuff like this.
Yeah.
I mean, the states rule the landlord-tenant laws, not the federal government.
Well, and so we have
that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I think, so I was fortunate enough to be at the table, to be a part of the discussion here in Nebraska with the governor's office and when they were rolling out their moratorium. And really, my argument to them was that the moratorium, I think, in the long term is going to do more harm than good. So they built into that they had to demonstrate that they were being harmed by COVID specifically, and even some certain circumstances that had to take place. And then that left room for people that weren't paying the rent just to be dicks to be able to be evicted. So in Nebraska, we had that kind of flexibility. I don't know what it's like in other states, but I do know that in the more local you get, the more opportunity you have of having reason be built into the process. So, but I still don't think that the moratoriums, even at the local levels, if they're done really incorrectly, help the tenants because it pushes the problem into the future. It makes it so that the tenants essentially have more debt on their balance sheet, for lack of another way of describing it, and that when it comes time to be paid, if they haven't taken other precautions, they will be easily evicted because they're so far behind and don't have enough money to catch up.
Well, I do think, though, that it did give them a chance to reap the benefits of all the money that's out there for tenants. There's, I think I read, still $45 billion left on the table. No, Scott, was that number wrong?
No, not quite. There's $26 billion total, but only 11% of it has been used.
11%.
Okay.
There's a lot out there. My office itself has collected more than $50,000 of it. And we manage about 1,000 units.
So
it's a matter of navigating the system. The system is very complicated, but once you learn it, you can coach your tenants through it or your landlords if you have to go through your landlords. Each area is a little bit different. I've had 3 staff people and my 3 offices dedicated to figuring this out. But now that was passed back in March, and we just started seeing money come in last month. So it took a long time for this to happen.
Okay.
So I wonder if it just gave us time to actually tap into that money.
Well, and I think that's a neat little point for people to understand. The federal moratorium, I think, added a lot of confusion, but in Nebraska, access to the money has been relatively easy. As a matter of fact, I think that our overall outstanding balances are down because there's a mechanism in place to reach out to an organization, and those organizations here locally, at least in Omaha, did pay the rents very quickly. There was a couple of months last year that it was like, okay, what's going to happen? But since then, it's been very efficient. So the takeaway, I think, from that is that it really is different in every single jurisdiction.
It is, and once you figure it out, though, it can move along pretty quickly. It's not nearly as slow as it was.
So there are a lot of cases, I mean, the courts are super backed up. So even though the federal moratorium is over, if there's not a state moratorium where you live or a local moratorium, now the cases are allowed to progress. But many times those are going to go very slowly, and still people won't get money for several months. What do you think that backlog is going to really look like in real life?
Yeah, the challenge is we do evictions every day. That's what the courts are there for. The only ramification a landlord has against a tenant is eviction. That's it. We can't go throw them out. We can't put them in jail. That's the only thing we can do. And when you take that away for 18 months, yeah, of course there's going to be a backlog. Yeah, there's going to be a wash of evictions going on. Absolutely. But these are evictions that would have been happening over the last 18 months anyway.
Although I would say, as a takeaway for our listenership and our viewership, you can reach out to local not-for-profits, which I think is usually the way it's distributed, and ask them what the process is to claim money either on behalf of their tenants or how they can get their tenants in touch with somebody, with an organization to help them pay their rents. Because those tools are out there, and there's absolutely money out there to be gotten, right? And getting back to the moratorium thing, I don't see how a federal moratorium even helps. The only thing it's done so far is cause some confusion.
Well, by and large, somebody getting this COVID relief money has to have a COVID-related problem.
Right.
This is not just for your normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill deadbeats, for lack of a better term. Challenge is we got a lot of normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill deadbeats in this world, and those are the ones that they'll be bankrupt. There's just no way they're ever going to be able to pay 18 months worth of back rent.
Right.
That may bankrupt their landlord.
Yeah, and that's the sad part. But so on a go-forward basis, what do people in our property management industry need to know based on everything where things are today?
Sure. The final part of that opinion from the Supreme Court talked about that as well. It talked about the necessity of getting the COVID relief funds to the places where it needs to be and getting it there efficiently and immediately. So that's the takeaway from this conversation that I think that your listeners need to hear. 2 of them. 1, the eviction moratorium is almost over. By the way, in the 6th U.S. district, which is Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, and Michigan, it was ruled unconstitutional 3 months ago. So they've been able to do evictions in the 6th district, 6th U.S. district for months now. But the rest of the country has not. So it's been a really moving target. This whole thing has the whole time. Kind of fascinating if you like civics.
Yeah. And actually, I'd kind of like to see if the people in that District 6 are any worse off than the rest of the country. That would be a fun study.
I'm in District 6, and I think we're better off.
Okay.
Then again, I'm in God's country. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
Man, that's why you speak funny. That's
exactly.
Okay. So, any other thoughts that we can leave with our listenership?
On this topic, I think we've done a pretty good covering of it. Yes.
Good job. Thank you. Good deal. Thank you very much for being on this Bootstrappers short, and really appreciate the input. And I hope it's helpful to our users or to our listenership on a go-forward basis.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this special installment of Bootstrappers. Our 3rd season premieres September 23rd.